All right, let's go over DM prep and how to run session 0 for Hoard of the Dragon Queen, the first half of the Tyranny of Dragons D&D campaign. I'm Dad the Dungeon Master. I've been a DM for over a decade. I am a published author, and I've actually run this campaign for multiple different groups, so I've made every mistake, and I'm going to help you guys avoid those. Now, I know the urge is there for the first time you and your party get together, especially if you're a new group that's never played. You want to play D&D that first session. And I get that. It's super exciting. You want to dig right in. But I highly recommend always having a session 0. If you do the beginning right, if you lay the foundation correctly with a session 0, the entire campaign is going to be way more fun than just jumping right in, kicking something off, and not really having the foundation in place to make the rest of the game work well. So, what I suggest you do for session 0 for this campaign is, and for most campaigns this stuff applies, get the group together, tell everybody not to make their characters beforehand. It's fine if they have an idea. It's fine if one or two people are set in stone on what they want to run. But as far as the backstory, as far as what brought the party together, I highly recommend doing that stuff as a group, and you as the DM can throw out ideas. It's a brainstorming session, and at the beginning, it's all going to be very vague, but by the end of the session, you should have a really solid understanding of every character's backstory and the party's dynamic, especially what brought them together and why they're adventuring. The first thing I recommend doing that works for any campaign is that you have your players tie their character to at least one other character in the party. Now, they can do it to more than one, but you want at least one connection to somebody else in the party from before the party was a group. That way, you start to form those friendship dynamics, like you have that one person in the party that you would sacrifice yourself for. And it's even fun, and if it's a new group, like your first time playing, you may not want to do this, but it's also fun to have one other person in the party that you have a negative history with. Now, they don't have to be like your rival and you hate them every day, you hate seeing them, and you're always working against them, but maybe there's something there, some rivalry. Maybe they beat you in a contest you really cared about, maybe they broke your sister's heart, but forming those dynamics, getting the idea at least of how you feel about the other members of the party makes the role play flow way easier, which role play is hard with a new group anyways. But if they have some idea of how they feel about each other before you start asking them to role play, it's going to make them have an easier time understanding who their character is, making it easier for them to play as their character when interacting with your NPCs. And it's going to help them interact with each other, which me as a DM, the most fun I ever have DMing is when my party members start role playing with each other without me having to be involved. That's when you've built something good, when you've built something right, and it's running on its own. For this campaign in particular, I recommend having most, if not all, of the characters' backstories somehow associated with dragons. It can be very, very strongly associated with dragons, or it can be vague. And if somebody's dead set against having their backstory involve dragons at all, that's fine. But I think most of them should, because this campaign so heavily centers around dragons. There's an appendix in the back, Appendix A, that has a list of unique bonds, and then it has 2 possible background features that you can use instead of your background feature. I don't like those. I don't recommend using those, and this is why. All of the bonds involve attaching you to the town of Greenest somehow, attaching each character to that town, and that bond is only really important because I think they were trying to make sure your characters would run into Greenest to protect it from the dragon and care about the people there. But I think that because it is so limited in its scope, because that's the only reason it's only going to matter your first session, that it is a waste to attach that to your character for always. And then as far as the 2 unique features for your background go, they both reveal a lot about the cult of the dragon, and that kind of transitions us into DM prep. There are some great things about this campaign, but there are some things that need to be adjusted before you start just running through it. So 1, you want to read the book. You don't have to necessarily read every single word, memorize every monster, every encounter, every trap, but you at least want to know the main idea of every chapter. Read the first few paragraphs and the last few paragraphs of every chapter. Obviously, you need to read all of the first chapter. and you'll see the whole story and where you're going. This is a story about discovering the activities of a dangerous cult, figuring out what they're up to, and trying to thwart their plans. The Hoard of the Dragon Queen is really only like the first half of the story, and then the Rise of Tiamat's the second half. But there is a fun climax at the end of this story. So, because that's the main goal of the whole book, is figuring out and working against this cult of the dragon, I don't like the fact that they're so open about that it's the cult of the dragon and what they're up to. So, what I suggest you do is don't use those features for your background. I wouldn't even openly give away the information that it's the cult of the dragon so early, the way the book kind of lets you. I like to tease those things out a little bit longer. I like to let the characters figure it out instead of just telling them. And it makes it feel more satisfying for the players. It makes it feel like they're figuring out this mystery and then thwarting it instead of being spoon-fed. You want that information to feel earned. You want the ending, the climax of the story to feel earned. And giving all that information up front, it's not as satisfying. Now, along those same lines of reading ahead what you're going to run before you run it, the last several times I've run this campaign, I've run it chapter 2, then chapter 1, then chapter 3, because chapter 2 and 3 are basically at the same location. Once you do chapter 2, you come back, they send you right back to the same place for chapter 3. Yes, it's possible you don't leave, you just stay there and go right into chapter 3, but I think that the narrative runs more smoothly, it makes more sense, and it feels like a better flow if you start out chapter 2, chapter 1, chapter 3. Now, how I handle that is I have my party start out as prisoners in the cult's camp. They got captured in another town, and because it's really, really hard to get a D&D party to let you capture them. Most parties, in most situations, will just fight to the death. And you'll just have to be like, oh, they knocked you unconscious instead of killing you. Now you wake up tied up. The only time I've ever had a party let me capture them for narrative reasons, I had a party I had played with a lot. And it was in the Out of the Abyss campaign, and they were down in Gracklstug, and I had 50 Duergar soldiers show up in the middle of town, and they were like, yeah, we're going to have to figure out how to get out of prison because we're not going to escape this situation. We can't fight our way out of here. And they were mature enough as players to understand that there were other options, that they didn't have to always fight. So especially if you're running this for a new party, they are almost always going to try and fight. They're not going to want to give up. They're not going to want to let themselves be captured. So that makes running chapter 2 really difficult if you do it after chapter 1. So I make that so it's already happened. They've already been captured, and then they fight their way out. They escape. They learn some stuff about what's going on, get to the town, and then while they're in town, the dragon attacks, and then they are fighting and trying to save people. Plus, chapter 2, running around that camp, is more role play. There is a little bit of chance of combat. There are some skill checks and other things that can happen, but running chapter 1 at level 1, trying to go through all those combats all through the town as the dragon attacks, I don't see how a level 1 party can survive that. It's going to be crazy hard for a level 2 party. So I also level my characters up a little quicker. As soon as they escape that bandit camp and they get back to town, they're level 2. And then I actually level them up again throughout chapter 1. I give them another level. So they're level 3 by the time they reach the end of chapter 2, which is really chapter 1. I run it second. So read through the book. And if you want to switch things around to make it run smoother like I do, go ahead and work that out ahead of time. Make a list of like the major points you need to hit throughout the story. And then what I do is for each session, I make a list of the major points I want to hit for that session. So you can kind of improv in between, but you have that list to make sure you're always working your way towards that next important point. If you're like me and you need to have minis to play with, obviously I'm a fan of minis. WizKids does an entire run of minis specifically made for this campaign. I'm not sponsored by WizKids or anything. I just don't like painting minis. I do like painting minis for heroes. I don't want to take the time to paint 500 minis for a campaign. So WizKids has a case of minis specifically designed for this. They're pre-painted. The painting's pretty solid. If you order the whole case, you're guaranteed to get every single mini. It's all these little boxes. They have 3 regular sized and 1 large or larger mini in each one of those boxes. I think if you get the case, you get 32 of those. So it's like 130 something minis. It is going to be around like $400 or $500. But if you look at that price versus unpainted minis you buy at the store, it's actually a pretty good deal. I'm lucky enough that my main group that we play with here at my table is super into D&D, and we usually, anytime we start a new campaign, we'll all throw in $100 to get the WizKids case of minis. It's also perfectly fine to run D&D with rocks from out in the driveway. That's not that big a deal. I just am letting you know if you're one of the people that needs to have minis. For maps, again, I'm super lucky. One of my players is super handy. His grandpa has a woodworking shop, and he built us a super sweet table with a TV built into it. So I take pictures of the maps from the book and put them on my computer and then put those on the TV. And that works really well for us. If you don't have that, D&D makes this awesome folder called Tactical Maps Reincarnated that you can get a bunch of pre-made maps from other like famous adventures, and they work really well. Your party isn't going to know exactly how every battle map is supposed to look, so you can get a lot of mileage out of that. I also like to, after session 0, go through the book and figure out where some important NPCs are that I can replace with characters from my players' backstories. I like to do my characters' backstories pretty early in this campaign. A lot of campaigns, I kind of press them out further into the story. But in this story, the gray area happens pretty early on. So I like to try and get the characters' backstories in pretty early on. And a really easy way to include one of your characters' backstories is to replace an important NPC from the book with somebody from their past. It's easy. You can plug and play. You don't have to change anything about what happens to them in the story or who they are for the campaign. You just have to choose somebody from their story and stick them right in. So with all that figured out, with your party formed, with your plan in place, and with all the accessories you either wish or wish not to use ready at hand, it's time to start running Hoard of the Dragon Queen. If you made it this far, throw me a like. If you are wanting to follow along with this entire campaign, I'm going to do the whole thing, or you want to see other campaigns I've done walkthroughs of, or any of my other DM advice videos, go ahead and subscribe. Shout out to my channel members, GL, Sammy, Jose, and our very first Champions of the Realm, highest level membership, Cody. Thanks, you guys. Making these videos takes a lot of time, effort, and money, and your contribution is really helpful. Here are some other videos I've done that you guys might like. Thanks, guys. God bless you.